Hello, David Zaritsky for the Bond Experience. Welcome back. So I did a video about the acquisition of this watch right here. Of course, it's the James Bond 60th anniversary Omega watch. This is it right here. And I did a discussion about the press around it, the experience of purchasing it, and of course, now owning the watch, what it meant, the whole 9 yards. But one thing I didn't talk about, because I wanted to save it for its own video, was a discussion at the press event with none other than Suttirat Anne Larlarb. Of course, the costume designer from No Time to Die. She is absolutely amazing, not just professional, but just genuinely a nice person. And more importantly, she's a Bond fan. She's really connected to the designs and everything that she focused on for the movie. And boy, is she a storyteller. So as a treat and as part of the celebration of the 60th anniversary watch, Omega had arranged for Suttirat to come to the press event for a Q&A, and we captured some of that discussion here. Now, obviously we didn't get the whole thing. We got parts and pieces, but I think you're going to find this a real treat because the Bond Experience, we know what you like. We just do, because it's very much what I like, which are these little snippets of behind the scenes, things that we would never know behind the doors and how things are created. So the first question that Suttirat was asked, and of course I'm filming the whole time like this, trying to be, enjoy it at the same time. So I'm not sitting looking through something. I'm just kind of sitting here like this. So it's not perfect, this film, but they did ask, when you get the mantle of designing James Bond for Bond 25, No Time to Die, how do you prepare? What's your preparation like? So check out what she said.
Sure. For lots of reasons. So part of that was one of the first exercises. I'd already been a Bond fan, and I, from the time of being a teenager, seen all of the films many times over, just purely as an exercise in watching interesting, stylish films when I was a teenager, and I was starting to become interested in fashion, clothing, and costume design. I always referenced the Bond films. Once the mantle was passed on to me, it's like a holy grail, and I felt so scared, excited, terrified. So in that, the only way to do it is to sort of do a forensic rewatch of everything and kind of analyze every sort of trope, every kind of situation Bond finds himself in, the villains, the women, all of it. I just wanted to understand it in a sort of more scientific way and sort of break it up into categories so that at least if I could kind of digest everything Bond from the films, from the perspective of clothing and character, then at least whatever script points would come my way, if things changed or the story would change or any new ideas would crop up, my knowledge of the history and the legacy and the heritage imbued in Bond would be coursing through my DNA so that I could have the ability to make instinctual decisions. Not saying that necessarily is how one wants to operate all the time. One needs to plan and have discussions and all of that, but I wanted it to be kind of under my skin in a really, really deep way. So I think that was a way for me to respect the heritage and to sort of take that responsibility. Like, taking it seriously was never even a question.
Sure. So I love that she focused on the heritage and the history and the connection to Bond and everything that goes around it. She took it very seriously, but she wanted to make sure the essence was there even from the other films, because the other films help build the foundation of the character. But the next question, of course, connects back to something very specific, and that is, how did you go about designing the James Bond commando outfit, the finale outfit, if you will, and ultimately the outfit that James Bond, dies in?
So, we obviously knew what was going to happen at the end. And so Daniel and I had talked about, we talked about everything. And he did all his stunt training in a building that was adjacent to where our costume building was. It was a building, two-story building. And he would come up occasionally and sort of sit down in front at my desk where I'd be drawing or doing whatever with my team. and we would have these brainstorming sessions, and when he would always be the first one to know what was going to happen if we didn't have the script pages yet. So I knew that we had this big finale to kind of think about, and we talked philosophically about how to send him off. And one of the really big things that, in thinking about it more and seeing it, I'm presuming everybody here knows how the film ends. So one of the things about Bond, obviously he's always sharply dressed, there's a lot of tailoring, but can you imagine sending him off at the end there in something like a beautiful tailored tux, and then it becomes an ending about him and not about his sense of duty, which is the sacrifice he makes at the end, right? So we're like ratcheting it back to his military history. There's a sort of vintage element, because vintage sort of like a vintage essential sensibility, a timelessness kind of runs through a lot of the design decisions and aesthetics of Bond. So I have this immense library that I travel with, like physical books of vintage references, and we talked about wanting to pay homage to his military background. We also talked aesthetically about him being more of a silhouette at the end, like literally the perfect man, the perfect form of man, the perfect soldier, the perfect hero, so that it became sort of, it's always going to be about Bond because the camera finds Daniel and it's a Bond film, but we wanted to kind of make it a bigger statement about the man, like a man. And so paring it down and streamlining it felt right. And I had these images of various World War II British military pieces, not all duty costumes, not all dress uniforms, but I kind of sort of picked a few things, and when I saw it was a version of this sweater jumper. It was olive, and I showed it to him. It's like I saw the boat neckline and the cord, and I feel like he's really gonna love this because it's something a little bit different, and he has a great physique. It's not quite like this mannequin.
What I love about this next snippet is she started to talk about N.Peal cashmere. I'm wearing an N.Peal cashmere top right now. You know them very well. We've done, 550 videos on them, who knows? But great company. And she talked about meeting with Adam, the CEO of N.Peal, and really focusing on how do we build around this opportunity to take the whole design and turn it into something that was very wearable. Check this out.
Bond in recent years, and he was so excited about the idea of doing a new piece of knitwear for Bond that it was so unusual, and I said it can't be cashmere for the film. I mean, he's got to do so much action. He's going to be burning up in it, it's actually cotton. Anyways, dye after dye samples, cotton samples, ribbing, widths, everything. He sent me tons of samples of things. I always pictured it being navy blue because of wanting it to feel like a silhouette. Found a pair of trousers in an image. I had a great workshop tailor downstairs from my office, and I went to him and I said, can we make 3 versions? I did quick sketches and we did 3 adapted modern versions of these military dresses, which we built in-house. So these are our make. And we had prototypes for the first fitting with all these like version A and version B of the sweater, 3 versions of the trousers, various boot options, lots of pieces. I called in the armorer and the prop master and the stunt representative because I really wanted to work out the pocket situation. I mean, nobody wants to see Bond struggling with a button to open to draw a weapon.
It's not quite as sexy, right?
Exactly. So we actually, when we did that, we had the form of the trousers and a few suggestions of pockets, but we had the prop weapons, we kind of worked out in the fitting what was going to be the best seamless, so there's quite a lot that goes into a costume like this. I did a count, I think on my side of things, pre-N.Peal, there were 28 people.
Now, of course, this wouldn't be a discussion in the halls of Omega without talking about Omega in some regard. So in this next question, she was asked about the watch that you see Bond wear in Matera when he's on his, not quite a honeymoon, but he's canoodling with Madeline in Matera. There's a vintage watch. He talks about that and then immediately jumps to the discussion of the No Time to Die watch, the one that some of us own and covet, and here it is.
We needed all kinds of doubles, and it was a vintage watch from Omega's vault. So we didn't want to destroy the one, right? We had stunt doubles and photo doubles, so we picked the one that was as similar to the idea as possible. So it doesn't have that long in the film. The more important thing was the new watch, in a way. The diver, and he basically wears that from Jamaica, where he's sort of relinquished his life with Madeline, which was already a relinquishment, if that's a word, of MI6 007 being Bond.
Right.
And that literally blows up in his face. He seeks a new life, and even though he's got this sort of idyllic existence on an island, no responsibility, freedom, all that, he's still Bond and he's at the ready. So I feel like as an extension of his like essentialism, every decision is at hand. Like he's not a character who you could ever imagine wakes up, goes to his closet and is like, what am I gonna wear today? You just can't, that doesn't feel very Bond-like. It's just, the answer is always there.
Right.
And so the watch has to be that as well. The watch needed to also figure in and tie into this ultimate scene here. At the end, I'm going to just jump forward to when Q reappears, and there's the scene where he's going to set off on his what ends up being the final mission, and Q demands his watch so that he can add
the N.Peal.
Yes, to the back of it. Now that's a very un-Q, un-Bond thing, right? Usually it's in Q's lab. It's a whole new device with all kinds of bells and whistles. But in this scene, Q, I purposely put in pajamas. He's been called out of bed for an emergency. He didn't have time to do anything. He knew what watch Bond was going to have, so he had to do something that he could literally just stick on. On an aesthetic level, aside from the practicalities of that, on an aesthetic level, I think this thing we were trying to do, which was make it less about like get rid of anything that could seem like a fussy decision, and keep the Bond from how we got to know him during this film as close to that as possible. So I just feel like putting on a new watch was going to draw attention away from everything that was about to unfold. And so it all kind of worked together well like that, I think.
What I love about this next question is when you think about something like this and how long it takes to design and create, we know a heritage piece like this has many moving parts, but we also know, excuse the pun coming, that it takes time. It takes time to create timepieces. So in this next part, she talks about the whole idea of how long beforehand you really have to start on designing and working on these pieces like the No Time to Die Omega watch.
Perfect a watch of the standard that Omega holds is so different from the organized chaos of a film timeline. And I think one of the things for if it's an Aston Martin vehicle, or if it's an Omega watch, or if it's a Tom Ford tuxedo, these are houses that have the time that it takes to do these things is the time that it takes. Because experts have worked out over centuries that this is what it takes to achieve excellence and perfection. A film tries to do it in 6 weeks. So luckily the history that a brand like Omega has, or any of these partners, they've had successful collaborations with the Bond franchise all along, so they know that built into our process, we need a little flexibility to keep fine-tuning things to the extent that it works and feels authentic in the film. So it's sort of a lot of pressure on both sides. I'm someone who's very fearful of consequences. So I knew that if I didn't get certain decisions into the hands of certain people at certain times, things were just not going to happen. But luckily, at the point at which I entered the film, Daniel had already had quite a lot of discussions with Omega. He already had a personal relationship with Omega. So he was able to get the watch to a point. Obviously the technical stuff could continue to be worked out, when I entered, there was enough of the sort of final decision making, the size, the strap. There were a couple of design details still in option form, option A, option B, option C.
I see.
So that I could then take that into a proper fitting with all, in kind of the same way I described getting to this. We need everything to still have enough wiggle room so that it feels right, so you're not shoehorning an idea before the story has really kind of landed with everybody it needs to land with.
I see.
So I saved something that was kind of special for last. There was a Q&A. There were only 3 questions that were asked before we had to go to the next part of the event. And I raised my hand when they said Q&A like a brown-nosed child in an elementary school. I'm like, ooh, ooh. Maybe I didn't go ooh, ooh, but I just, boom, hand raised, and I asked the first question. My question was, could she have imagined all these years later, from when she started filming this, when she got the job, that she'd be sitting in an Omega boutique in New York City with people buying 60th anniversary watches, that she would be a part of this history of James Bond in such a significant way? And you've got to hear her answer. It's chef kiss perfect.
Who doesn't think of what an opportunity it is to contribute to something like this. It's sort of bigger than anything you could imagine, and built into a Bond film is this challenge to carry the torch from the previous one and lay down the gauntlet for the next one. Mm-hmm. And so it's a proper challenge. And so I think the sort of meganess, the juggernaut that it is, it didn't escape my scrutiny. I really knew that I would be entering into something that I hadn't, there's nothing really on this level. At the level, I did a Star Wars project after, which arguably is that kind of level of influence. But right. I think with Bond, there's something sort of the timelessness of it, the sort of sophistication, like these kind of intangible things that aren't really about, trendiness, or you know what I mean? There's something like it goes back to what I was saying about Bond. It's just sort of like this platonic answer of something.
Yeah, and people aren't wearing Jedi robes on the street of New York. So,
no.
It's very true. It's very true.
Yeah.
Well, maybe, right? Maybe.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. I told you that would be special. First of all, I want to again thank Omega for setting up this wonderful series of evenings, discussions, and celebrations, but most of all for Suttirat. Suttirat has just been the most incredibly vocal individual, such a wonderful connection. And I have to tell you, when it comes to ambassadors to James Bond, she's probably one of the most embracing people of people like us, fans and people that are interested in the sartorial or costume or accessory world. And I want to thank her for that. That's no small feat. And she was incredibly generous with her time and her information. So thank you, Suttirat, until we meet again. In the meantime, I'll let you go. This has been David Zaritsky for the Bond Experience. We'll see you all real soon. Take care. Thanks for watching this episode. If you want to be up on the latest from the Bond Experience, just click on this subscribe and subscribe to our channel. You're going to get all the latest and greatest information, plus some exclusive content. And by the way, speaking of content, here's something especially for you, just because we know you. Talk to you soon.